Hi, it's John here from House of Chaos, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made these really inexpensive trees for my wargaming table. So, some prep work. First off, we've got what I use for decorating my terrain pieces. This is some just green string you need to do. Let's get some of this. This is garden twine. I think this cost me about £1, this whole bundle. And wrap it around my fingers like that. Pair of scissors, cut it off, take them off my fingers like this. Now, what I'm going to do, I don't know if we can zoom in that far, is I'll just move it around that way. Do this. This is awkward. I'm just going to trim it and trim it and keep trimming into the box. Oh, let's try and get this a bit closer so you can see it. I'm only trimming off a couple of mil. Let's try it the other way round. This could be tricky, being right-handed. Just being a bit careful. Didn't think that was going to work too well. Oh, here we go. Keep doing this. I spent an evening sat in front of the TV doing this and got a whole Tupperware full, and I'm just taking a couple of mil each time, each cut. Every now and then I might put a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. Be careful, don't want to cut your fingers. This stuff doesn't mix well with blood. As we get towards the end, I'm just going to flip it around. There, that's the end of it. And what you'll end up with, just zoom the camera back out a bit now, is, try and hold that out of the way. Oh, where are we? There. Something that looks like you've been chopping up some spring onions into a Tupperware box. What I'm going to do is chuck in some weight like that, put a lid on it, start mixing it all up, start breaking it down. And I'm going to spend the next half an hour cutting up, and we'll see how much we got. So see you then. Okay, we're back. And I lied, it wasn't 30 minutes, it was 20 minutes because I run out of the screen twine. Trust me, the amount that's in this box now, times that by 10, and that's how much you'll get out one of those reels of green twine. So as you can see, in 20 minutes we've at least doubled what we started off with. What you need to do is keep that in a box because it will get everywhere. Okay, so that's the first bit of prep work done. The second bit is we're going to need some green clumpy foam. So I'll move on to that right now. Right, green clumpy foliage stuff. How do we do this? This is a kitchen sponge. You can pack 6 of these for about £1. You're going to need, I would say, 1 maybe 2 per tree. You'll probably get away with 1 per tree. First thing I'm going to do is pull this off. Now this is the most frustrating, but it's also one of the easiest steps in the preparation work. It's frustrating, and I'll show you why. First thing we need to do is just start pulling little pieces off, and this is why it gets frustrating. It just static, it will stick to absolutely everything. You want to pull these little pieces off as small as you possibly can. It's punishing on the fingers. And the reason why, because we'll soak all this in green paint later on, and it will absorb the green paint and will double in size. So what I'm just doing there is just stripping bits off, fighting like hell to get it off my fingers. So that bit there is quite big. That will double in size. That's not a problem, really, because the first layer of this green sponge will pop down when it's green on the tree, will cover up pretty much most of the glue that we're going to use. And I'm just going to spend a bit of time doing that, and then spending twice as long trying to get it off my finger. And for this purpose I'll do 2 of these. If I was going to make a whole forest or a wood, I would probably do the whole pack of 6. You can get these kitchen foam scrubbers, plate scrubbers, with green foam already, but it's not the green we're looking for, but it does help when it comes around to absorbing the paint later on, which again is quite time consuming. Not that you have to do a lot, it's just waiting for the paint to dry, because it will soak right into this foam or sponge. It'll be quite punishing on the fingers as well, so If your fingers start to hurt, have a break, have a cup of tea. If you can't get it off your finger, chop your finger off. Just this stuff will absorb the blood. Right, she'll be back in half an hour. So, 2 kitchen foams later, or sponges later, this is what we got. It's going to be about enough, I think, for what we need. Trying to get the sponge in the tub towards the end was a bit of a nightmare. So just to help things along, because the next part will be to coat all this in green paint, I'm going to chuck a couple of coins in. Now don't worry about this, because we're getting these back later on and using them. Do that, put the lid on, is the coins will pick up a lot of the sponge, and with any luck we'll start taking some of the stuff out of the sponge. Cool. And what I'm going to do is leave that now overnight, and hopefully that will start discharging some of the static that's built up, and then we'll get around to colouring it green. Right, so for the next part you're going to want some green acrylic paint. This is some real cheap stuff. Some sandwich bags and your little tub of foam pieces. We're going to put this in here like that. Give them all a bit of a break them up a bit. Get those coins out. And then, here's the fun bit. Going to mix in some paint. And squidge it all down. What we're trying to do is get that paint not only to coat the little sponge pieces, and it looks like I've got a hole in the bag already, but for those sponge pieces to absorb as much of the paint as possible. And it's a lot better and easier to add paint than to put a load in and then find out that you've got too much paint. What I want to do is get all of those pieces covered and soaked in that paint. And just kneading that all around. You could put it in a bowl and do it by hand, but trust me, paint gets everywhere doing it like that. And the last time I done it, it was in the kitchen and it didn't go down particularly well. I'm just going to knead all that over. these are all through. Just make sure nearly every part of that sponge has soaked up plenty of the paint. Yeah, got a hole in the bag, terrific. Now that should be enough. What you need to do next is get a baking tray, probably an old baking tray. I've put some cling film in this, and we're just going to get rid of that bag, dump it all in there, and then spread it all out. What you want to do with any big clumps like that is just to break it up a bit. And let the air get to it. Like that. And then put that aside to dry. Now I'll normally leave mine 48 hours. And that'll get nice and dry, and you'll find out that this will start to swell up as it absorbs more and more. See, some of those smaller pieces we pulled off are now twice the size because the paint's got in there. And when that dries, it will dry at that sort of size. Okay, cool. Now on to making the trees. And these are crafting wire, or as if you're old like me, they used to be called pipe cleaners. I've got these, a pack of 60 of these from Poundland for £1. Includes in the title. What I'm going to do is get 6 of these. Doesn't matter which colour. If you can get a darker colour, it will help you out in the long run. 3, 4, 5, 6, that's number 7. I'm going to line them up like that. A pencil. About 2.5, 3 inches in. And bend it over like that. And then bend it around. And this will make the main trunk of our tree. I'm just going to bend that up like that. Keep twisting these. Every now and then I'm going to pull one way. Twist again. Pull. Should we do 2 the other side? There is no real thought process behind this. It's just we're going to make it look like a bit like a tree. Seventh one, we're going to put that in, wrap that, start wrapping that around. A bit more here, around the top. Bend that out. Need some clippers. Start clipping little bits off. Tidy that up. This one here, this lower limb, shorten it down a bit. And again, just twisting to make the branches. A bit off of there. What you don't want is it to be too lopsided on one side, because when we glue the sponge on, it will pull over. That's it. So I'm going to do a few more of these. Once you've done that, pull the pencil out, bend the loops out. Forgot to do it, could have done with some bigger loops here. Loops like that. And when we come to glue this to the base, it will help for it to stand up. So I'm going to do a few more of them. So there you have it. I now have the framework for 6 trees. Now we're going to need to put these on a base. For the base, I have some poster board, you can use thick card, and the base I like to have quite large, just on the grounds that I need to put some weight on it. So 6 trees, I need 6 circles. And with that, some scissors, let's get this off of here, make it a bit easier to handle. And then it's just a matter of cutting the bases out. I should be back after I've done that. Okay, I've got the hot glue gun heating up there. And before I go any further, I'm just going to take a marker pen and just blacken the edge of the card. We should do that to all of them. The first lot of trees I made, I forgot to do this part, and then after I painted and based all the trees, it was a matter of having to go back and trying to fiddly put black marker pen or paint black along the edges, and it was a real pain in the neck. So I'm going to do that to all of them. Right, so I've just blackened the edges of the bases. Now, hot glue, and I could glue that straight on to the centre of the base, like that, and then we can carry on. However, this tree will be a bit top heavy, and having no weight on the base will make it fall over, and we're all about practical here. So I'm going to add some weight to the base, and what I'm going to use for that is 2p pieces. If, like me, you shop through the self-service checkouts, you will no doubt have a load of these floating around. You don't have to, you could use rocks, washers, but this, I find I have multiples of 2p pieces floating around all over the place, and what I'm going to do is just put a glob of hot glue on there, put it down on the base, make sure I've got some hot glue sticks ready to go. Wow. Now, metal conducts heat, so just be careful, they will get hot. And let's put some weight on the base. Now I'm going to get the tree, stick a load of hot glue around the base of my tree, plonk it on, wait for that to set and get hot glue on the thumb, and then I'm just going to coat the base with hot glue. You can see that. I'm just putting the strands and running it off like that. And there we have our tree almost ready for texture. Now I'm going to do the rest of them and I shall be back after I've done so. Okay, so I've now based all my trees. And what I'm just going to do is just bend these, make them a little bit more detail in it. Because branches are not straight. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to put some texture on this. No, sorry, that's wrong. You don't have to put texture on this. You could just paint that black or spray it black, or put some texture on it. Now, in the past I have used sand texture gel, which is great, but the texture isn't that good on it. And the last lot I used some flexible painter's filler. Now this is pretty good because when it dries it's still flexible, so if you need to put more pose on your tree you can do. So we're going to use this, and I say we're going to use it if it's still any good. Yep. Just going to pump a load in there like so and release it. Let's put that to one side. Okay. As I've textured these trees, I'm only going to texture mainly just the trunk and maybe some of the off branches. I'm not going to worry about the ends because these are all going to get covered up with our sponge. So to do this, I've got a bit of offcut card that we use for the base. Just going to grab a load like that and just smooth it on. And it doesn't have to cover up all of it, just enough. If you can see that or not. as I'm laying it on, I'm smoothing it over. Not great, doesn't have to be greatly smooth. Greatly smooth, if that's even a word. Proper smoothed. And then I'm just going to take a little bit off and get around to the tops. And like I mentioned before, I'm not going to worry too much about the branches because they'll mostly be covered up. This will help with painting later on. So what I'm doing, I'm just running that up like so. And I shall do that for all of them. Okay, so that's the filler on the main trunks of the tree. Excuse me. Like I mentioned before, I'm not too worried about these branch at the top because they're going to have a lot of sponge on it. And I've not completely covered all of the pipe cleaners, but just enough. What will happen is when this is dry, I'm going to leave this 24 hours to dry, by the way. We're going to go and either paint it black with some acrylic paint or spray it depending on the weather. And that will start sealing all that in. This little furry wire stuff will soak up paint like you wouldn't believe. So it's a bit tricky to paint, but once it's done, it's going to look really cool. Any flexible filler I had left over, I just chucked on the bases. It's not that important. So we're going to leave them 24 hours. Okay, it's now been at least 48 hours since we applied paint to our sponge, and as you can see, it's all dried out nicely, not stuck together. Things to watch out for. This piece here, this is where the glue didn't absorb all the way in to the sponge. The paint didn't absorb all the way into the sponge. It's not the end of the world, because we can always glue that and hide that piece. As you can see, this is what you've got to watch out for. Sometimes, this is usually because I haven't squeezed the glue in enough, the paint in enough, it hasn't absorbed at all. So what I'm going to do, transfer that back into our pot, and you're going to find it's not going to be static at all anymore. So we can have the baking tray back because I believe it's oven chips for tea. Oh, let's move that this way a bit. So the textures and the fillers glued on our tree trunks. This took pretty much overnight for it all to set up. I took full advantage of the good weather and went out and sprayed the majority of these with a cheap black spray you can get from anywhere, Poundland, discount shops. If you live in the UK, you'll know what it's like trying to get outside to spray anything. So those 5 are done. I didn't spray number 6 because I wanted to show you how we're going to paint this with acrylic. And to do that, you're going to need some black acrylic paint, watered down, 50% paint, 50% water. And what we're going to do, this is non-stick parchment paper or grease-proof paper. Let's just turn this upside down and see if you can get a good angle on this. Get a good wad of paint, and we're going to dab it in to, let me move this a bit. And the reason we're going to dab it in, because all that felt and fur and stuff on the actual pipe cleaners, there's probably a proper name to it, will absorb the paint quite quickly. So I'm going to do underneath first, underneath all the branches. And I'm just quite violently just jabbing it on, making sure everything is covered. Doesn't have to look pretty because we're going to be painting over these again, and then you're going to have a lot of your flock on there. Do that. Because it's flexible, you can bend it out, trunk out the way, and get into some of those more difficult parts. Gonna get into the tops there, and then once I've done the underneath of the branches, I shall go around and do the tops of the branches. Bend those out the way, bend that flat. Once you've done the branches, it's just a matter of getting the paint, your watered down black paint, on as much of the tree itself and some of the loops we made at the bottom with the pencil, because they're going to start to look like some roots. Make sure we get into all the nooks and crannies. Around the base. And That's good enough. That's all you need to do. I don't know if you can see that. The light's probably not very good. But this has given the bark now a slight grey tinge to it. And you could probably, if you want to, leave it like that. If you look at trees in the wild, very rarely are they brown. Brown trunks and bark. You'll find that they're a mixture of colours, mostly grey and greens. But in case you don't want to leave it black, let's paint up some of the others. Okay, so here's the trees. These are the ones that were sprayed. I'm going to use raw sienna. Again, somewhere I'll pick this up in some hobby shop or discount store. And I am just put a blob on my plate. Take quite a bit of paint off. That's better. And then I am just going to dry brush it, to be fair. Not being particularly neat with it. I shall do the branches. It's quite a thick branch there. And I'm going all around the trunk, across the base. Across the top of the branches. Most of these will be covered up with the sponge anyway, so it's not that important. Anywhere where your black spray paint hasn't got properly, you can just paint into it. Got properly? Okay. And same, just make sure you do underneath the branches. Just like that. In case you do happen to look up from the tabletop, I want to break the immersion. That's it, that's all I'm going to do. Not sure if you can see that or not. But with that texture we put on, with the flexible filler, it's given a nice cheap and easy bark effect to our tree. I shall get on with the rest and then we'll be back. So that's all my trees all heavy dry brush with raw sienna. You can see that. I mean, it's not brilliant, but we're weighing out the cost. And remember, these trees are never ever going to be knocked down accidentally. So we're on to the next stage now, which is by far the most difficult, which is gluing the sponge on. So before we start gluing our sponge to our branches, let's talk about glues. PVA is a liquid. Super glue is mostly liquid. And this is sponge. So you can imagine what will happen if we put super glue onto this and then try to put it on to our branch, or if we try to put PVA on and then onto our branch. What will happen is this will absorb the super glue and it'll fall off. So we're going to use, let's get these out of the way, hot glue. And how we're going to do this is, first thing I'm going to do is pick out some big chunks, and then just put a dab of hot glue on there, some on here, and then stick it on. And we're going to start building up our branches. The reason I'm putting the hot glue on to a mat and then dipping the sponge into the glue is because we're going to get, I'm not sure if you can see it, these stringy bits. Now, if you watch where I built the farm buildings, I'm not too concerned about that. Again, I'm not really concerned about on the trees either, because once it's cured and set up and gone hard, we've reverted back to its natural state, which is quite a thick, flexible glue. You can come along and just pull them off, snigger. But to make things a bit easier, because there's going to be a lot of it, we're just going to do it this way. So, dab of hot glue, we're just going to stick it on. A little word of warning, sponge will absorb heat as well as water. So, just be careful because they will get hot. And I'll be right back after we've done the tree. Okay, so I've started on this, and as you see I've put lumps on the end, lumps of sponge on the ends of the branches, and if you look closely it's getting very stringy. So what I'm going to do now is just put this off to one side and start on the second tree. And I would do this just 2 trees at a time. Don't do any more, because what will happen is you'll find that if you try to do more, you'll run out of sponge and you'll be halfway through a set of trees and they will look pretty bare. Very much like this one. So I am speaking from experience. Going to carry on doing this one. This is one I've done a couple of weeks back and run out of sponge. And as you can see, there's blobs of glue in there. I'm going to cover that up with more sponge, and as it slowly builds up it will start to cover some of this. But like I said, put one off to the side. Once you're ready to come back to it, just get these strands out the way. and you'll find that they mostly pull off. If you get a stubborn bit, take some side cutters to it, it won't hurt, and then you'll just slowly build the tree up with bits of sponge. Okay, so as you can see, I'm starting to build these trees up now with the sponge, but I've just had a bit of an idea. Gluing the individual pieces on can be a bit of a pain in the ass. This is parchment paper, greaseproof paper, excuse me, and what I'm going to do, cover that in hot glue, grab a handful of this, push it all in, and then wait for it to dry. And when it's dry, if you're real careful, you can remove it like so, and then bit of an overfill there. Glue it straight to the branch. Yes, it's not pretty, but it'll save a lot of time. So I've pretty much finished putting the sponge on the trees. What you'll find now is you're going to have lots of stringy bits of glue. And ideally what you need to do is just wait for it all to dry and solidify, and then go around and just pull it off. Snigger. It won't take long to do, and we also need to remember a lot of this you won't see because it's underneath. Once you've done that, if you've still got blobs of glue showing, you can, if you want to, get a bit of green paint and just touch them over. Now, when we were painting the trunks, I mentioned not to worry too much if you miss pieces, and the reason for that is I'm going to grab a bit of hot glue, on there, some sponge, and just stick it in like that. Little piece there, little piece there. It just gives it a little bit more tree-like characteristics. After you've done that, you can then start decorating the base. So, these are not the trees we've been working on during this video. This is some I've done a few days back. And you can see there's still bits of hot glue showing through. So, pros and cons. Do they look realistic? Well, hell no, they don't. Are they easy to make? Yes. The only real problem is the hot glue, and I'm sure if you put your mind to it, you could probably find another way around that. I'm impatient. Tacky glue might be an option. Cost effectiveness, what we actually do. So each tree consists of pipe cleaners, sponge, green paint, flexible filler, a cardboard base, and some weight for the base, and some homemade basing materials. So basing materials, you can get 100 meters of green garden twine for less than £1. The actual trees, the pipe cleaners we used, Poundland, you can get 60 of them, 60 pieces for £1. The sponge, 6 of those cleaning sponges for £1. The acrylic filler you can get in Poundland, £1. You can even get the skeleton gun, or the cartridge gun as it's properly known, for £1. How many trees do you get? You probably get about 10, and they're a good decent size. The only other thing is what you use for weight on the base. These are not going to be knocked over every time someone nudges the table. Downside is this hot glue. It can be a real pain, constantly clearing it up. So you're talking, I don't know, maybe £5 to make 10 trees. That's not bad going. Yes, they don't look great. Look, still picking bits off. We need to find a new way of gluing this sponge on. They don't look great, but they are practical. That's never going to fall over on your table. Get a group of them together and you've got yourself a little forest. Ideally, you can just move them out the way if you need to. Move figures through them. The only other thing I would suggest you do is give them a coat of hairspray. That will seal it all in, and that's it. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please give it a likes up, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and hopefully I'll be back shortly with another video on making budget terrain for your wargaming table.
This is a House of Chaos production. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.